Hey guys, so what we're going to talk about here is Queen's Gambit. A lot of y'all probably have heard of it. A lot of you probably searched for this. For those of you who haven't, it's like probably the number one show on Netflix at the moment. It is a limited series. I believe it's 7 episodes, something like that. Very long movie style format, like 72 hours worth of a movie. And it's about the chess world. Specifically back in the 60s, transitioning into the 70s. I don't know if it actually gets into the 70s, but it's during that time period where chess really had its glory. Even though they don't glorify chess in any way, shape, or form in this show, which is something that's very important to note. So, you almost can consider this a biopic, even though it's not. It's not a real character, but the way they frame it. So first thing, a lot of people are thinking, okay, but this is a chess show, right? This is a chess show, so I wouldn't be I'm not really into chess. Well, a couple things with that. One, even if you don't love chess, you would definitely appreciate some of the dynamics and the beauty in the game, which is they do very well. Two, it's more of, as I said, a biopic framed in the world of chess. So I'm going to do a couple of things. I'm going to go over one. I'm going to go over some of the character arcs or the overall plot. And then two, I'm going to go into certain, I guess, scenes or how the performances were done from an actor's perspective, what worked, what didn't. So going into the overall story, the pacing was good. There were certain parts that felt a little rushed. There were certain parts that felt a little slow. But overall, it was really, really well done. I think the parts of the pacing that worked really well were Beth, or Harmon, whatever you call it, Beth, let's say her, Anya Taylor-Joy's character, does a really good arc of what it would be like to be an orphan, but I don't even say like hyper intelligence, because I wouldn't even say that she has that. It's almost like a prodigal gift, and that's very cool. So they do that really well. It's almost like framed. Her ability to play this game is framed in the storyline of an orphan trying to figure out who they are. That's the whole point of the show. This is almost like a coming of age story, but with unique nuances that don't apply to everyday life. So that's why I think why it's very interesting. So in terms of that, the pacing's really good. I think certain aspects of the pacing that could have been done better. There's certain aspects of her, you want to call it downfall or her spiral, that feel a little dragged out. Certain aspects of her struggling with alcohol, I felt, were maybe a little bit long-winded, maybe a little bit self-indulgent, even though that's the main part of the show, is her dealing with that. Still, certain parts of her spiral felt a little off, and certain parts felt rushed. So I think like a good example is her with Harry. Yeah, Harry, right? Yeah, Harry. I believe the way that they kind of got together, it was a really interesting perspective on what it would be like to, for somebody to love you and you not really love them back. And that was what kind of happened in the case of Beth and Harry. Really interesting dynamic. It ended up being like 10 minutes of the show or something. It was very quick. That was a very good scene. And it even ended with a really amazing. Harry stole some of the show with some really powerful moments. I will talk about him in a second, but especially his moment where he's leaving her with the suitcase. I'm going to talk about that acting in a little bit. But to talk about, like, in terms of, like, rushing, that felt kind of rushed, where they kind of did a really good job of the arc of Beth and Benny's character. Really good arc, from rivals into almost like a teacher-student relationship, into an intimate relationship, back into its student-teacher relationship, because honestly, Benny didn't really have the capacity to love anyone other than himself. Beth was still in love with, what was the editor's name? I think that's the person that I'm struggling. Towns? I think it was Towns, right? I think it was Towns. If I'm wrong, I apologize. But her still being in love with him, but trying to find the potential to love Benny, but not being able to love Harry. So there was this interesting, really, the way they did relationship building in the show is absolutely phenomenal. Definitely the best part of the show was how they did certain relationship building. I'll get into that in a second. But there were certain aspects of, the plot that could be a little bit, rushed parts. Certain aspects of the chess game itself. The reason why I say it's not even a chess show is, or because it really wasn't, is they don't really teach you much about chess. You don't really learn much. This is coming from somebody, and I loved it. I loved all the chess aspects. I used to compete in chess when I was a kid. Not to their level. I'm not trying to say that. But I used to, and I really enjoyed the show. And when I was watching it with my folks, I would explain certain aspects of what they were doing with like the Sicilian Open and things like that. But like they didn't really cover much. It was almost like from game to game, and at some points they just were skipping games and were showing like 2 moves of the game, and it was that's why I say it was really more of a biopic on Beth, which was really cool. That's how you frame like a storyline of a person. It was like a slice of life. Her and her growing up, coming of age story actually is a better way to put it, and it was framed in this world that they built, this little universe that was real, and it was relatively accurate if you go and research it. There were certain aspects I think that were a little bit off, but overall it was good. It was consulted with chess masters, I believe, or grandmasters. And so arc-wise, it was good. Storyline, was it compelling? Yes. Oh man. Even it could have borderlined on dry. It was really close. Really, really close. It could have been dry, but it wasn't at all. It was so interesting, and that had to do a lot with the character performance and the relationships. Let's talk about some relationships. So let's talk about her relationship with guys. Perfect example. So with her and guys, you have Benny, you have her relationship with Towns, you have her relationship with Harry. You have a relationship with the twins. Okay, so let's talk about the twins first, because let's go order of importance somewhat. So with the twins, what a great, okay, the show is so good at subverting expectations, like brilliant at subverting expectations. So you think those twins who are kind of like, they're jerks, for lack of a better term, because I don't want to get demonetized or whatever. And I'm trying to like keep my language not too intense. So you have these twins. These twins gave this really good, and a lot of people maybe didn't think about it like that. They just kind of like were there like background characters. No, they weren't. They were the people that judged her first, because during that time period, that's what you did. Girls didn't play chess. It wasn't. It was a level of sexism that was like more ingrained, because once they found out that she was good at chess, they idolized her. I loved that dynamic. There's ingrained sexism in the era, especially around the game of chess that was solely male-based. In real life, I believe the first world woman champion was like in the 70s, something like that, maybe like early 80s when I checked. So it was relatively accurate. It was not very common. So you have this really interesting dynamic with her and the twins, and they ended up becoming like her like really casual support system that like loved her, and she had like genuine fans that were like her genuine friends. Perfect dynamic. Her and Benny, really interesting, complicated relationship in that Benny's character had flaws in himself, about his self-indulgence, about his thing, and like they led us into his vulnerabilities that were less about his ego and more about the fact that he didn't live in a really nice place. Wasn't even the best at his thing, but he almost like revered it. He revered that aspect of himself, that he knew he was so confident and had such a secure self-esteem, but like hyper arrogance, that he knew that she was better than he was, and like he like was proud that he knew that when she maybe kind of did but didn't really understand, like that. He even loved that. I love that dynamic. That was like a different level, a different take on arrogance even. And then the relationship they built, where she kind of was gonna build something to want something, because she had like that actual chemical intensity towards him, that spark. But then she found out very, very, very quickly that wasn't gonna happen. Actually, their after intimate scene is one of my favorite after intimate scenes ever, where she's like, that's what it's supposed to feel like, and he just starts talking about chess again, which ties in beautifully. Let's talk about Harry, her relationship with Harry, which was great because Harry, when he leaves, brings up a point, and this is why it's so great. This is why you plant seeds and you tie things together. And that's like really good creative direction. So you have Harry, and when he leaves, and I'll kind of go back into Harry, but when he leaves, he discusses that he realized from her that he didn't love it the way she did, but the way she loved it is like an addict. Loved it. It was almost like he knew of her passion, but he almost called it out on something that it wasn't a healthy level of passion, which is just, yes, all of it, yes. And that was perfect because it juxtaposes exactly what we're talking about with Benny and his self-obsession, which even went farther than Beth's, in that he literally only thought about chess. Like, at least she was trying to become a person, which is, we'll talk about her arc. But so we have Harry, and Harry's was interesting because part of what I guess you could disagree with me, but something I didn't like is they didn't really give context to why Harry fell in love with Beth. That was a really good point and throughout, that she was the only like hot girl in chess, with lack of a better phrase, and the guys wanted to go after her, and she was a little bit promiscuous because she was trying to fill the void that she had. All of it flows perfectly, but with Harry, I don't know, he just like came back, and it was like a pleasant surprise, but you kind of didn't understand why. Kind of threw you off just a little bit. But his relationship with her, in that it was a very common thing. One person loves the, so she didn't love him, but she needed a companion because her mom literally just passed away, and she was in this empty house by herself. Okay, and he thought maybe he could make her fall in love with him. It was like it was this beautifully pain tragedy almost, and I really liked that dynamic. So it's great because you have this tragedy, but that's common, and you've seen that. But the thing that came from was the lesson that was learned afterwards, which is just amazing. You learn this beautiful lesson or Harry did, and that from this framing device, just being with her and trying to make him fall in love with her, he actually learned in himself that he just isn't as obsessed because he wanted to do other things. He wanted them to fall together. He wanted them to build something, and she just wanted to build chess. And I love that he learned something from that. Now, here's the best aspect of the whole show. Her relationship. I guess we can talk about her relationship with Scheibel, which is really interesting. You thought that was going to be way bigger than it was. That was another subverting expectations. You thought it was going to be this really big, monumental moment where she was going to, just keep building a relationship with the janitor. The janitor was going to teach her. No, the janitor was the foundation for her experience, and then was kind of her grounding point when everybody thought she was going to come back, have that moment with the janitor. But instead, they have the janitor die. They have Mr. Scheibel die. And it just came out of nowhere. And then she has to go to his funeral. And then you didn't really understand, like, why did they do this choice? And then you see the billboard or the collage of her stuff that he saw over the years. I just got goosebumps from that. And then she really has a moment in the car where she understands. And a perfect example is her relationship with Jolene, which almost felt a little bit, you couldn't tell if it was going to be supportive or toxic. She was going to be like a bad influence on her. But in the end, she was probably like one of the most real relationships that she had. Just family. Family is not blood. Family is a choice. Family is something that you actively choose to have, and they actively choose to support you. God, I love that moment. I love that scene. And like when she breaks from finally realizing that she was so caught up in her own stuff that she didn't even take the time to go appreciate the man who taught her who taught her the game and nurtured her gift, who gave her money to like really support her. She wouldn't even have started without him. So that's so great. But okay, let's talk about the relationship of her and her mom. Best relationship of the whole show. By far the best relationship of the whole show. So the reason why it was so good is because you never see this dynamic. Sometimes you'd see the mom take advantage of the prodigal kid. Sometimes you'd want to live vicariously through them. Sometimes they would just become toxic from jealousy. Sometimes they would become too parenty, if you like we're, like this thing where they try to hold them back from their gift because it's not what they think normalcy looks like. You see, no, this was her chance at freedom, and she knew how to support it. And it gave this dynamic where she wasn't really parenting her, which actually is why she became such a screwed up individual later on. But yeah, it was this really cool dynamic where you found that she loved her mom. You didn't even think that was going to happen. You thought they were going to become just like these distant people that helped each other and cool, that's great. But you really didn't think they were going to love each other. Love each other the way that they ended up doing, which is really interesting that's how it happened. So her and her mom, you got this really good, I guess, case in point where the mother was just coming out of a marriage, if you want to call it that, coming out of that. And she had one of my favorite lines of the whole show. I think I could learn how to be a mother. You've heard stuff like that before, but you never heard it with the weight and with the impact that it was supposed to have, which is beautiful. And I guess, so you found that her and her mom, really interesting dynamic in that they almost were friends, but not. Beth did respect her mom. She never even yelled at her in the show. I was expecting that. I wonder, were you guys expecting for her to blow up at her at some point? Because there were certain things that she was irritated by. I heard frivolness. No. I guess her whimsicalness sometimes she would get a little annoyed with. But she just loved her mom. She respected the hell out of her mom, and it was just beautiful to watch. But I thought there was this really cool dynamic between them where the mom was as much trying to find out who she was as Beth was trying to find out who she was herself. So they were each trying to find out who they were, but they had this mother-daughter dynamic. And Beth was able to give her mom the ability to be free, which is all she wanted. And in part, her mom tried to be the best mom she could be and nurture the gift that Beth had. You never get to see it. But in doing so, she maybe didn't find a balance in doing that and being a parent. And so Beth wasn't a well-adjusted person, coming from the trauma of her childhood into, and I love that they don't really go too hard into her childhood. It's just flashbacks in her own mind. Great creative choice. But then this idea that she's coming from the trauma of her childhood. She's coming from the trauma of being in an orphanage, even though they were good to her. Oh, I love that they weren't that bad to her. They were just strict, but they weren't that bad. It wasn't an abusive orphanage. It was just her figuring out her way in this lonely, lonely world. And she found this rock, this beautiful rock in her mom. And then she lost her. And the weight of that wasn't just the scene of her crying. She didn't even get to say goodbye. It was just the down spiral effect of losing your only companion. That's how you build relationships. I'm not even going to get into her and Borgoff because that's more of a rivalry than a relationship, the way that the other ones were. But now I want to get into the acting. So let's start talking about Anya Taylor-Joy's performance. So Anya Taylor-Joy is a really interesting actor because how would I put it? She tends to have a more stoic style. She's done things like Morgan, Vitch or Witch, the Witch with the 2 V's, which was awesome. Split. She tends to have a very reserved style of acting. She's actually been criticized for that style of acting many times in the past. Why is this focusing so much? Sorry, my camera's just imploding. So she has this stoic style of acting, which isn't technically bad, but some people think it's a little bit more wooden in her style. Brie Larson tends to get this comment as well. So how do I feel about that? I would agree that she tends to have a more stoic style of acting. There's a reserved element But usually in acting, when you're trying to have a reserved element, you're actually trying to do a build into a larger and a more explosive, either an explosive climax, you end up doing a very steep crescendo in terms of storyline arc as an actor. Oftentimes she doesn't do that. She stays reserved for much of the film. That's an acting choice. I usually don't. I think it sometimes can be a little bit boring. Um, that being said, how do I feel about her performance in this role? This was her role. Oh man, was this her role? Oh, it was so good. Some people gave some criticism on it. Let's talk about the acting style. So, first off, she's playing an orphan child who literally just becomes orphaned, goes to an orphanage, feels really outcast, and then becomes a prodigy chess player, which is a very reserved sport. Um, doesn't really get a nurturing family, ends up bonding with the mom though, and has a really wonderful relationship with her. So the way she plays it very early on, that's exactly how that character would be. She plays it very reserved, often remiss to talk, which that's more dialogue, but the way she even handles herself is not very not very expressive. So with a lack of expressions, that's perfect, like absolutely perfect for this type of character. Works really well. Now, as she goes on, first off, kudos to the costume designer for making her be able to look like 13, 14, 15, up until like now she looks like 20 or like, I don't know. She does really good. Who that costume designer, did I say she? Sorry, I don't actually know who the costume designer is. I apologize for that. So the costume designer did a really good job of doing that. However, Anya Taylor-Joy did this amazing job of playing believable. Yes, she definitely seemed older than a normal 13-year-old. However, this is a 13-year-old who's a prodigy in a very intelligent-based game. It makes sense. I thought she was very believable, which is insane because she should not have been believable. Not even just the look, but even just the acting style. I think there was a couple dynamics where maybe she could have shown a little bit more emotion. However, you never know if it's the creative direction of the director or the actor. That's the whole thing. You never know who to quote unquote blame because that's a stupid word. But who impacted what? Because it's a lot of times it's direction, a lot of times it's actors, sometimes it's the producers. You know, a lot of times a lot of people get involved. Sometimes it's a whole studio. So that's just a note. But what I found here are the things that I thought were interesting. Perfect examples of like things I can't actually judge on. When Jolene, her sister who came from the orphanage, came back, I don't know, her acting felt a little bit too reserved for me. I felt like there should have been more of a reaction to it. However, that could have been a completely accurate acting choice. Jolene was always a more intense part of the relationship. Like in their two-way relationship, she was a way more intense direction of the relationship than Beth was back in the early on. So maybe it was actually very accurate to the character. Something to note. That's up to you to decide. When she's kind of finding herself in her sexuality, which was awesome. It wasn't harped upon. I love the way they did that sexuality in the show, by the way. The way it was with a couple of characters, but the way it was like her sexuality, her promiscuousness, her ability to like empower herself. Like I thought Anya Taylor-Joy did a great job of showing that expression, but trying to keep an element of poise into the fact that she was this chess champion. Loved it. I thought she did scenes her best, in my opinion, her best acting so far in her career has been the way she has shown her frustration with like losing. And it wasn't even that she had the ego of losing. It's her world, as she put it. It was her world. She can control it. The one thing she could control in her life. Oh, I love this show for that dynamic. The one thing she could control in her life, which is this chessboard, because she couldn't control anything else in her life. And when she loses control, and the control is the only thing she has. So that's why she's getting frustrated. Not because she's losing, but because she's losing control. It's just such a good dynamic. And I thought Anya Taylor-Joy, like, dominated it. I thought she did that. She she tried to keep her poise, but she was losing her struggle. You could see it in her eyes, and her eyes are everything. She doesn't tend to put a lot of expression in her face. It's all in her eyes. She did it. The eyes of losing control with Borgoff, when she had the hangover, when she had the like, all of it. She did a great job of showing losing control. Here's aspects of things I didn't 100% love. I don't think she really played the downward spiral of alcoholism 100% that well. I thought she did a decent job. I don't think it was bad. Some of it felt a little bit forced. And I think I like that she was pushing her comfort zone of acting. I thought that was great. I think actors 100% should push their comfort zone. I have pushed my comfort zone multiple times in the past. It has looked awful multiple times in the past. It's what you need to do. It's like what works. Not everybody's just a Daniel Day-Lewis where they can do anything they want and it works. So I thought that was cool that she got to do it. It was still a very compelling scene. But there were certain things that just felt a little forced. Some aspects of it didn't. Yeah, and I can't even tell you which ones did. Like when she hits her head on the table and she's kind of struggling to get it. Like some of that felt great, but some of the dancing felt a little off-putting. Maybe she wanted it to be, but I doubt it because it's supposed to be a little bit freeing. She did look a little awkward, which was good, but overall it felt a little bit forced at times. Also, I think she could have built a little bit more of a compelling relationship with her and the pills. Even her with the alcohol, but her with the pills in particular. This kind of need, this struggle to be centered, maybe, but needed because she thinks it's what she needs, even though she really didn't need it, which she found out at the end. It was so good. Oh my god, the chess scene at the end where you find I didn't expect that. I don't know why I didn't expect it because it was actually pretty obvious, but I just didn't expect it, and it was a beautiful moment of the ending final game, which was just really cool. But sorry, I just love that. But I think she could have played that a little bit more. There were a couple scenes like at the end, which actually was a creative choice by the director, but I think maybe she could have helped with it. When she just kind of like takes the pills and then decides not to take them. And then like, okay, I don't need them, but I should be taking them. It was an interesting creative choice, but maybe it's a little bit Hollywoody to like make her have this really huge struggle. But like, I don't know. I didn't see anything in her that she was even arguing with herself whether or not to take the pills or not. She just like was like, pills, cool. Nope. That's not how that would have happened, and I think she could have sold that more. So I think there was that. In terms of ensemble performances, I might go back to Anya Taylor-Joy, but in terms of ensemble performances, Benny, who's played by Thomas, I forgot his last name, but he's from like The Maze Runner, and he was the little boy in Love Actually, Liam Neeson's son. He did great. This is his type of role. Actually, he doesn't usually play like a bad guy role or like the bad boy type role, so I guess that's a little different. But that swagger, that like thing, actually, that's true. He tends to play a little bit more, not dorky, but like that friend next door person. And he played a little. I believed his swagger. A couple times it was a little bit, not forced, but a little bit much. But like I liked it. I liked everything about his performance. I thought it was really nice and grounded in the character. And what I mean by grounded in the character is his character had very distinct things. High self-esteem, borderline hyper-arrogance, was addicted but didn't really show it because he almost romanticized the game. So you just believe that it was right, even though it wasn't. It wasn't right. But he made it feel okay because he knew how to romanticize the game, so you just loved his passion. But then you kind of realize that it was actually toxic, and you find that out throughout the seasons. Throughout the series. Limited series. So I thought that was really good. He grounds it in the character, which I love it when you do that. You let the character stay grounded in it, and there's a couple of really good scenes that I might cover over time of that show that. But ground in the character and then just let the character live. He did a great job with that. There were certain aspects of his relationship with Beth though that I thought were a little off. I don't know. I didn't really understand. Maybe you weren't supposed to, but I didn't really understand his relationship with Beth. I didn't even know when he was liking her and he wasn't. Was he jealous of her? Wasn't? And I guess that's like complexity. But I think sometimes the actor he wasn't giving it to me. He wasn't selling me on anything. So I didn't really understand his dynamic. I didn't even expect anything with his relationship with Beth. That whole dynamic, that whole time period with her in New York. But nothing. He didn't sell it, and I thought Anya did a good job. I thought she was selling what she kind of wanted from Benny, but Benny didn't really sell me on what he wanted from anything. And if he was just trying to teach her chess, I didn't even really get that either. Teach her to become her full potential. I didn't even get that vibe. I don't even know what was happening. So I thought that was a little off, but overall, great performance. Harry, who's played by Harry, that's his name. Yeah, that was great. He played in The Devil Lies Within or something. All Lies Devil. The thing with Tom Holland and Robert Pattinson, things like that, really bleak movie. And he played a bad role in that because everybody was pretty much bad. He knew how to provide heart into the speeches. He gave a couple of speeches, like by the car with her about being careful and he worried about her outside the door when he's leaving her. He has like probably most of the most important speeches. And it was interesting because he provided, like, he knew when to sell those. He knew when to sell those moments, which was really, really good. So he knew when to sell those moments of like those big speeches, but how to like not make it like all about him. They weren't self-indulgent. They were just like his honest thoughts. I love that. That's like how you speak to honest thoughts. Her mom, Marielle, I don't know who. Or Alma, sorry. Alma's played by Mariel. That's her real name. Alma, her Mrs. Wheatley. She was great. I don't know. That's how you play like a good, like almost like side character, but not even a side character. Just like a character that's not crazy self-indulgent in her own performance. She was like, that's how you provide context for the main story. Really well done about like she was having like her own arc without you even knowing it. Like you weren't into her arc, but it was compelling, and she was having it. The characters have storyline arcs, whether or not the director shows it or not. That's like very important to note. And she did that very well. So overall, and like Scheibel did a great job. It didn't have that much, which is great. Even like the headmistress, like those are good side characters. They played their role. They weren't too self-indulgent. They had their importance. That's how you play a good side character. It's awesome. It's not easy to do. It's very nuanced. I loved it. So kudos to Anya. Probably her best performance. By the way, when I do any of these criticisms, guys, there's always criticisms. And everything's up to interpretation. Everything's subjective. Acting is subjective. I'm giving you my perspective as someone who's trained, who has gone through certain things, who sees things in the world of acting as opposed to just solely in the world of storytelling. So please, no offense. I'm not destroying anybody. I'm not thinking I'm better than anybody else. No, this is just fun perspective for you guys to think about. I want you to see this, hear these things and think, oh, that's what I was thinking. Or, oh, no, I was thinking completely different. Please provide your perspectives in the comments. Like, give me if you think it's different. So overall, good job, Anya. Good job, ensemble cast. That's an ensemble cast that's just worth everything. And it was a great show. So I hope it even makes you pick up a chessboard sometimes. Chess is such a great game. And on that note, sorry this was maybe a little bit long, but I wanted to go into a really deep dive. If you guys have any suggestions on shows, movies, things that you want me to go over, scenes that you want me to go over, I would love to do scene breakdowns. Please put them in the comments. I try to do a few. I'm going to try to do a few in a week. I'll see what I'm doing. I have a full-time job, guys, but I'm gonna try to get better at this. And be sure to like, share it. I mean, not even like that. Don't do whatever you want. If you thought this was great, like it. If not, it's okay. If you want to share it, great. If you give me perspective, I would even just rather have that. I love the engagement. I would love to hear from you guys. See what you guys think. Maybe some of you guys are actors too. So, in that note, I'll see you guys in the next one.